Hello, Runnels Christian Church and friends. I am Pastor Katie Russell Haimline, and this is a sermon meditation for April 26, 2020. It comes to us from the Gospel of Luke, the 24th chapter. I'll read verses 13 through 35 from the NRSV translation of the Bible. This is the Easter story on the road to Emmaus. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. A few days after this time of social distancing began, my dad called me one day and asked if I had any room in my freezer. Like many people, I had stocked up on frozen vegetables and some other essential non-perishables, like ice cream. I told my dad, I was sitting pretty good. "Well, make room," he said. "I'm bringing you meat." A few weeks after that, my stepmom and my dad delivered an Easter basket to my garage, complete with 2 slices of birthday cake for me to enjoy on my birthday the next day. And a week after that, a package of Canadian bacon that my dad had smoked himself appeared on my doorstep. I kept telling my dad, I was well stocked. We were sitting okay. My husband and I were not going to starve, and yet the food kept coming. It occurred to me that in this time when my extended family really cannot gather together, bringing food was one way that my dad was feeling connected to his children, one way he could show us that he loves and cares for us. And I don't think this is unique to my family. When a friend falls ill, a community often surrounds them by stocking the freezer full of casseroles. When a beloved church member dies, the congregation prepares a funeral meal for their family. Our local news in recent weeks has been full of stories of people feeding one another. One company opened a $500 tab at Smoky Row and declared anyone who came through the drive-thru wearing scrubs should get a free cup of coffee. A restaurant in Linville served lunch to 286 truck drivers hauling essential goods down I-80. And a friend of mine, who I haven't seen in years, added me to a quarantine cuisine Facebook group, believing that sharing recipes might be one way we can stay connected in this time when we are apart. I think that often, when we don't really know what else to do, we bring food. It's how humans show that we care and love one another. And what I appreciate about this story on the road to Emmaus is that Jesus does this too. When Jesus doesn't know what else to do, he brings food. This story takes place on that first Easter Sunday. There are two men traveling on the road from Jerusalem to Emmaus talking about the strange events that had taken place. They can't believe Jesus has already been dead 3 days. And they had hoped Jesus would be the one to redeem Israel, but now, with him in the tomb, they are hopeless. They're so hopeless that when the women in their group say they have received a message from angels that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead, they don't believe them. They are so hopeless that when other disciples in the group go to the garden and see the empty tomb for themselves, they don't trust their report. They're so hopeless that when Jesus himself appears to them on the road, their eyes don't recognize him. So hopeless that when Jesus begins to interpret the scriptures for them, going all the way back to Moses and the prophets so that they might understand these things that have taken place, they cannot comprehend it. It seems like Jesus is about to give up on them. How foolish you are, he says, and he's going to continue down the road without them. But then, not knowing what else to do, Jesus brings the food. He breaks bread with them. And in that moment of sharing a meal, sitting at the table together, their eyes are opened and they believe. Evangelism is a word that often makes a lot of us bristle, because when we think of what it means to evangelize, we think of people knocking on our doors or approaching us on the street demanding to know if we know the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But evangelism isn't really about coercively cornering someone or pressuring them into a confession of faith. Evangelism simply means to share the good news that Jesus is alive in our world today. It means witnessing to that, pointing out when we see Jesus in our midst. And sometimes the best way to bear witness to that is to bring the food. This story of Jesus tells us that the men on the road to Emmaus aren't won over by the testimonies of women or the other disciples. They aren't even persuaded by Jesus's impressive biblical arguments. Their eyes are opened when he breaks bread with them, when he performs a simple act of love and connection. They remember that having someone walk beside them on that road when they were sad and hopeless made their hearts burn, made them feel warm and comforted. And that is why they believe. We have said this Easter wasn't like any other Easter before, but in many ways it was like that first Easter, when two men set off from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They thought they were alone on the road, and some of us feel alone right now too. They wish to go back to the days when Jesus was alive and teaching in the synagogue, and many of us wish to go back to the days when school was in session. They said, "We had hoped Jesus would be the one to redeem Israel. And we have started many of our own sentences that way in the last few weeks. We had hoped the number of cases would be down by now. We had hoped we could reopen our business. We had hoped we would be worshiping back in our sanctuary. We had hoped, we had hoped, we had hoped. I had these hopes too. But in this time of great uncertainty, the one thing I know for sure that we can do, bring the food. We can do that in the most literal sense, of course. Offer to pick up groceries for someone who shouldn't be going out. Write a check to the food pantry. Order takeout to support a local business. Leave a gift card for our heroic healthcare workers to get a cup of coffee. But I also mean that we should do that symbolically. While we observe social distancing, we can still make sure no one feels like they're walking down this road alone. Write a card, pick up a phone, deliver a toilet paper care package. That is evangelism. That's what it means to bear witness to the Easter story. When the world feels sad and hopeless, we show that love and compassion still wins the day. Hearts are warmed, eyes are opened, good news is proclaimed and believed, and Christ is made known in the breaking of the bread. I look forward to the day when we can gather together in the sanctuary at Runnels Christian Church again. But until then, I offer you this blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and grant you peace. Amen.